Recently I bought an Oculus Rift, and after spending a little time getting it set up, I did stream my first ever experience, which was playing Elite Dangerous, and I thought I would share with you what I experienced, what I felt, and what I think the future of virtual reality holds on my channel specifically. Now, I only tried out the tutorials on Elite Dangerous, and I can tell you even those were an incredible experience. The difference between playing Elite Dangerous as a normal flat 2D game and playing it in Oculus Rift is night and day. They're almost not comparable from the point of view of how it makes you feel. Even straight away, sat in the cockpit inside the hangar, you feel the difference. It's immediate. You look around the cockpit and you can see all of your instruments, but you can see your chair, you can see your own hands, your legs. You can look behind you and see first aid kits and a door. It's incredible. I mean, I only tried the Cobra, which is a fairly small ship. I've no idea what it must look like to be in one of the bigger ships and just look around the cockpit. You really did feel like you were inside a spaceship. And you find yourself getting completely obsessed with the daftest things. You start standing up and trying to see over the cockpit onto the front of your ship, and then opening up the weapons so you can see them coming in and out of the, what do you call that? The weapon bays? It's amazing how fascinated you get by the simplest things. You're looking out of the window at the hangar, and it looks incredible. And it's hard to describe why, because the resolution is lower than the resolution on my monitor. There's fairly obvious aliasing in comparison to how I would normally have it. So graphically, it just doesn't look as good in theory. And yet, because it's virtual reality, it just looks incredible. Obviously, you get a sense of depth, and that's important. I mean, that's where it all comes from. But when you imagine that sense of depth, you kind of imagine it'll give you a feeling of how far an object is away. And that is true. But that then leads to a lot of other feelings, and it is feelings that just make the experience so much more intense. The hangar felt large. It felt large. It wasn't just a matter of looking and seeing the wall was further away than the window of my ship. It was this feeling I got of being in a large hangar. And then when I launch the ship and go into the main area of the space station, that vast cavern, it feels like an enormous cavern. When you play the game normally, you know it's big. You can see it's big. But when you play it with an Oculus Rift on, it just feels immense. And it's not just size that feels more real as well, it's speed. You know, when you exit through the gateway, you feel like there's a little, well, you feel the speed, but it's moments when, well, I had this one moment where a canister I was trying to shoot shot past the window, the canopy of my ship, and it almost hit the canopy. And I was going so slowly by the standards of that game, you wouldn't believe it. And yet it felt like that canister flew past at several thousand miles an hour. It was really kind of unnerving. I cringed in my seat. I ducked as I saw this canister fly over my head. The feeling of speed was just intense. And I think in the end, that's what virtual reality is about. It's about feeling like you're there rather than seeing it. And it's so hard to describe. Now, I did start feeling some nausea after about an hour. It wasn't intense, but it was noticeable, so I think it's something I will have to get used to. I can tell you I tried another game called Eve Valkyrie for about half an hour, and it's a spaceship simulator type game, but it's more combat oriented, far more arcadey. Instead of playing with a joystick and throttle, you play with a game controller. You can play it with joystick, but it's designed to be able to be played with a game controller, so it's not that complicated. But because of the combat arcadey nature of that game, everything feels closer. The other ships are closer, and you feel like you're moving much faster. Your ships are much much more agile. And the feeling of nausea I got from that game was so much more intense. And it hit me very, very suddenly while I was doing some spins. I was spinning around to try and find my target. And I came very, very close to having to run to the bathroom and vomit. It was mind-numbingly nauseating. And indeed, I felt ill for, well, probably the rest of the evening, and even the next day I felt a little funny in the tummy. I felt like I had a hangover. It was a very weird experience, and I've read up about this, and apparently some people never get used to it. I'm hoping I'm not one, but even if you do get used to it, there are some people saying you probably shouldn't drive after you've been playing in virtual reality, because it does mess with your balance, and it can make your responses to things a little sluggish. I sort of understand that now. It really hit me way more than I imagined. So overall, my experiences were amazing, but there was this cautionary aspect to it, this idea that I might be feeling sick on certain games. So probably what I will have to do is grow accustomed to playing on an Oculus Rift by playing an hour or so, maybe every week actually, not more than that, on a game such as Elite Dangerous, and becoming used to the movement, the sensation, and then maybe I could progress to games where there's far faster and more aggressive movements without feeling nauseous. So, maybe I will become accustomed to it over time. How will it affect me in games that are more sort of shooter based or RPG based? For example, if I can get Skyrim working with Oculus Rift, will that make me nauseous, or is that going to feel different? Only time's going to tell, I guess. But that brings us to what I consider the main point of this video actually, the future of virtual reality on my channel. Will I be streaming virtual reality streams? Will I be recording virtual reality Let's Plays and posting them? And I'd have to say at the moment, probably not. I think it's going to be a while before the technology is at a level where I think it would work well for a Let's Player such as I. And I'll explain that as we go along. The problem is what you, the viewer, sees. In a normal game, you see a landscape picture, 16:9 ratio probably, 1080p, and you're sort of used to watching things like that. And you also are used to watching a very steady camera. The head doesn't bob up and down very much in these games. They usually remove head bobbing, and everything's fairly steady. Even if the person using it is twitching his mouse, which can be nauseating, in comparison to virtual reality, the camera work, even on the twitchiest mouse user, is reasonably steady. I mean, obviously it can be extreme. If the person's trying to wiggle their mouse to make you sick, they'll manage it. But with the Oculus Rift, people watching it were feeling nauseous pretty quickly and complaining that it was unpleasant to watch because of my natural head movements. And there's very little way to control that actually. Well, you can. If you concentrate very hard on making smooth, slow head movements and try not to move your head up or down or tilt your head, you can minimize the effect. But it still looks pretty, well, not bad, but it looks, here's what it looks like. Instead of looking at a 1080p landscape view of Elite Dangerous, it looks more like you are viewing somebody who's recorded the footage on a mobile phone and has not turned it sideways. They're doing portrait recording and they're holding it on one hand whilst walking. It's got that feeling to it because that's probably pretty much exactly what it is. My head is always moving slightly when I talk, when I look. Even if you look slightly to one side, your head will move in response. And if you gesticulate with your arms, your head moves along with your shoulders a tiny bit, and you see it on the feed. So everyone who was watching me play could see these tiny movements. Now, if you're thinking, oh, well, I can't get an Oculus Rift then because that'll make me nauseous. No, when you're wearing the headset, you don't feel it. It's the same way as when you're walking, you don't feel like the image is shaking. You don't feel like the image is shaking when you're walking because your eyes compensate for all of your movements. They do it automatically without you thinking. But if you have a camera strapped to the side of your head and you record it, and you watch that same footage later yourself, it will look like it's bouncing up and down and it will make you feel sick. But while you were walking, you felt no such thing. So if you want to play on an Oculus Rift, you can. But watching footage from an Oculus Rift is less than pleasant. The image is also slightly off center. Now, when I originally started, it also cut off the top and the bottom of the screen, especially the top. Lots of the top was missing. But I've managed to get it so that I can record pretty much everything that one eye sees. But that's, for example, well, it seems to be the left eye. But if you think about it, the left eye, if you close your right eye now, you can see far more of the image on the left-hand side of your head than the right. Obviously, your nose gets in the way. Well, that's what you see when I record. You see from the left eye, which means the center of the ship, so to speak, your crosshairs are off to the right-hand side, and you can see more of the left than the right. It's a little weird, but once you notice it, it starts to bug you a little bit as well. So you've also got that problem. You're never really seeing exactly what I'm seeing. You're always missing a little bit on the right-hand side. And seeing as to make it more pleasant, you tend to want to zoom in on the image so that the viewer gets a better view. You might be missing some of the peripheral on the top and the bottom. It's a trade-off to try and give you the most details whilst allowing you to actually zoom in and see the picture as well as the person wearing the Oculus Rift. Now, after talking about this on one of the streams, I realised this will probably get better with time. I think a lot of game developers now realise the power of streaming and YouTube videos in selling their products, in making people want to play them. If people can watch me playing Elite Dangerous on an Oculus Rift, and they get a very pleasant experience, they might be more likely to want to play that game on their Oculus Rift as well. So I think over the years we will begin to see developers coming up with ways to have a streamer play with an Oculus Rift on their head, or a virtual reality set of any type on their head, but the image that is broadcast to everyone else is a little different. What I was saying was, if you think of the Oculus Rift as being basically showing the footage from two cameras, your left eye and your right eye, and it sends that to your Oculus Rift. And instead of sending the left eye's footage to the stream, if instead it actually had a third camera that it placed in the center of your head, or where your head would be if you were not moving, and sent that image to the stream. This would make that image very, very stable. It would also mean you could make the image, make it a different camera, make it widescreen 1080p style camera, and therefore everyone would get a far more normal view. You could also make it so that when the person's head tilted, it reduced the tilt a little bit, or had a dead zone, so there was less small mini movements that cause nausea, and it basically smoothed the movement out. The way on your camera you may have a function that reduces the amount of, I don't know what you call it, shuddering. There's usually a setting, you press it and the image will look more stable. Image stabilizer. They will come with an image stabilizer for the stream. I think this sort of thing will become an option. Obviously that's going to require a much more powerful rig even than is required now for Oculus Rift, because instead of two images being created, which is twice as demanding, you can have three images, which will be 3 times as demanding, and that third image might have some other requirements to stabilize it, so it may even be 4 times more demanding than a normal game. However, that would of course be something that streamers and professional YouTubers might consider actually upgrading for. Now, of course, I'm speculating based upon what is realistically 2 hours of playing with the device and streaming with it. So obviously I'm not an expert on this. It's just my gut feeling of what will be required for a Let's Player streamer like me to actually use this on a regular basis. And I specify like me because of course there are some Let's Players who can probably stream or record Oculus Rift footage and make it very, very entertaining, but I suspect it's people who actually have face cams, and a lot of the viewers are watching to see their reaction and whether they're going to fall out of their chair and break their neck or that type of thing. They'll probably spend half their time looking at the face cam rather than what's on screen. I am a more sort of immersive Let's Player, and I want people to focus on the game, and if that game footage is less than pleasant to look at, I don't think people are going to want to watch it. Because here's the thing, it may be a much more intense experience for me while playing the Oculus, but for you, the viewer, you get all of those disadvantages I've mentioned, all the shuddery camera, the lack of vision, and you get none of the advantages because you don't get that feeling of depth. You do not get that feeling of immersion. All you get from the experience is to hear my excitement or my fear when I am immersed. And that might still be a thing, but it's going to be very hard for you to really get inside, you know, the mind of a Let's Player like me when you're looking at this fairly shaky and horrible camera. I mean, I can only imagine how cool it would be to play a game like Outlast or Amnesia Dark Descent with Oculus Rift. Can you imagine how terrifying that would be? It would be awesome. But if recording it makes a very unpleasant to watch experience, it's not going to be something you guys want to watch. So I would say for the near future, Oculus Rift is something I may stream occasionally, just for fun, just for giggles, maybe a new game, but it's probably not something that's going to end up in recorded videos, at least not until the game developers have started making options that are far more, well, YouTube friendly. So that is it. To summarize, basically what I am saying is playing games like Elite Dangerous on the Oculus Rift is incredible. I don't believe I could actually go back and play Elite Dangerous without virtual reality now, even though it makes me feel slightly sick. The experience was that good. Playing using the Oculus Rift is incredible. However, it's not particularly conducive to good Let's Plays or streams at the moment. Okay guys, that is my ramble on this subject, and I will see you guys soon.